So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about using the mask options that are now available in Lightroom, and specifically a little secret hidden tool called Intersect With. Now, I'm not going to walk you through the reasons to use these masks or how they work. I do have a mask Lightroom video that you can watch if you really need more or want more information on these new masking options. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm in this image and I am wanting to work on the pink color tones. And my idea here is to really saturate and brighten a little bit of this pink. Now, if I did that down in the color panel, it would impact the entire image. So what I'm going to do is go in and I'm going to use Select Subject. And we're going to see how well Lightroom does. Now remember, you can change your overlay color. So I'm actually going to change it today. Let's do maybe a blue. And so it's done a pretty good job. It missed this one section, but I think for our purposes with just working on that brighter pink, that's going to be okay. Now, what we traditionally could do is once we had our mask, we could come in and we can make our adjustments. So I could come in now and I can saturate this color even more. I could also change the color tones using the hue slider. But I want to make an even more micro mask. So what I'm going to do is come up to this mask that I've created, and there are these three little dots. You're going to want to select those, and there's an option that says Intersect Mask With. And so this is where you're actually getting to add a second mask to the one you just applied. So we are intersecting this current mask with another one. So the title's a little confusing, the intersect with. It's basically refining your mask even further. So for this, I'm going to do color range. And then now I've got the dropper, and I'm going to come in and tell Lightroom which color that I want to enhance. And I'm actually going to select this light pink color. Now you notice that it selected it throughout the image because it's there. I'm going to come in and try again. There we go. So sometimes you have to move your selection around because I really just want to impact this top part and this really lighter pink color. There we go. So now what we've done is we masked the flower, we told Lightroom what our subject is, and then we mask it further. So the beauty of this is with this mask, we're not impacting this part of the image which has that light pink color in it. So now I can come over and it's saying color range, and I can actually refine. So let me show the overlay, and I can increase this. You can see it's increasing the saturation. I can also decrease it so that it's just highlighting these really soft pink areas. Now I can also remove it if it's somewhere that I don't want. So I can come in, and with this mask, I can also subtract. So I'm going to use the brush, and let's say I don't want it right here, and maybe I don't want it over here. So I'm going to just remove these areas that Lightroom found just a little bit. And I can increase the density on my brush and get most of that off. Okay, so now we've refined our mask. We know exactly where it is. I'm going to remove Show Overlay, and now I can tweak this color. So I can start with saturation if I want, and if I take it all the way up, you can see how much darker it is. I just wanted to make a small micro adjustment to it. Now I could also change the hue. So let's say I wanted to add a little pink to this. I could go in and do that. I could add a little bit more red. I could add some yellow tones. So depending on what the original flower looked like, or depending on my creativeness, I could modify that. So I could make this a little pinker. I'm going to take it right there. And I could go back to my saturation and change that a little bit if I want. I could also reduce clarity, which is going to just really soften it even more. Maybe reduce the texture. And I could add a little dehaze if I wanted to. So I think I'm liking that. Let's look at the before. Oops. before and after is not wanting to work with this mask selected. So let's see, the computer was running slow. There's before and there's after. So if you just look in that center section, look what a brighter pink I've added versus removing it. So I always use the backslash key to check that out because you may want to modify. So I think I'm going to bring the saturation maybe even back down. I like that I added that color, but I don't want it oversaturated. So let's check the before and after again. And there we go. We can also just make some fine adjustment to this color. Just dial it back just a little bit before and after. Okay, so that's one way to use this awesome new tool. So let me recap for you at the top what you're going to see in your mask. So we're going to see the mask 1, and it's got the mask for us. We started at the bottom with our subject. So we did a subject selection. Then we did the color range, which was our intersect mask. And then I used the brush to remove some of the mask. So remember, the masking always starts at the bottom with what you started with. All right, let's go to another image and try another example so that you can see a couple different ways to use this great tool. All right, so I'm going to show you this example. And in this image, I actually did some adjustments already to this one that we can review together. So let's click on the mask, and you can see I've got 4 different masks here that I did. So let's start with select subject. So this first mask, I selected the subject, and then I went in and did a color range. So I selected the subject, which you can see here. I intersected it with a color range, and this color range was the center of the flower. I wanted to impact this center area. Now, I could have used the brush tool, but I wanted it to be very selective because there are purple tones and green tones throughout my image. So I didn't want to just use the brush either because I didn't want to overlap, and it's a little bit quicker, to be honest, to just select your subject. Then I did color range, so I went for this center. You can see the mask here. And then I did a brush to refine it. So I wanted it just in those particular areas. And from there, I used the tool to brighten and enhance with the, let's see what I did here. I added some texture, exposure, and brightened. So I'll show you before and I'll show you after if you just look at that center part of the image. Now the next adjustment I did was to the color. So again, I selected my subject. I intersected it with a color range. And so this time I wanted just the original color of the image. So the original was a dark purple, and here I selected the color range, and then I applied a color hue change. So I altered the hue of the image. Now if I wanted to go now and change this, I can select, this is where we are in the image, and I can come in now and actually modify this color. So I could take it back to where it was before if I changed my mind. So you can see where I changed it, and I could take it back. So if you ever are working on an image and you decide you need to go back to one of your masks, just open it up, select on the last mask that you applied, and then you can alter the hue or whatever you want to do with this image. Let's say I wanted to add a little clarity to this image or reduce it. I could come in and modify that still while I've got this mask selected. Okay, so the next mask that I did for this image was in the lower right grass. So let's open that one up. So what I did here is I selected the subject, but I inverted it. So I inverted, which there's an option right here, so that I would have just the outside area selected. Let me click on Show Overlay. Then I applied a linear gradient as my intersect with. So I went in and applied this gradient. So I knew I had the outside area selected and I only want to impact this part of the image. And from here, I actually applied and did some brightening to the image. So originally it was a little dark in this corner and I wanted to brighten it up so that it really matched the rest of the image. Now the last mask that I used for this image is up in the upper right. So I started actually with a linear gradient, so a little bit different. So I went in and added a linear gradient to this upper section, and then I intersected it with a luminance range. So with the luminance, I selected this bright area. Now the beauty of this is my linear gradient was selected. Let's show the overlay here. Here's the linear gradient. So I'm telling Lightroom to only work within this linear gradient. And now I'm selecting the luminance just in this area. And I can also do a color range if I wanted, and I think that's what I ended up doing. And I could even invert that to impact those areas of the image. So if we look at before and after. So I changed the stem. So if you look at that before, I brightened it. I obviously changed the color of the iris just to show you how to do that. If you look over in this corner, I just brightened up the color tones there just to match the image more uniformly. And then I did make some very small adjustments to the highlights up here. They're really soft, but just a little bit of some adjustments there. So many things you can do with this new Intersect tool. So let's go back, and now I'll do another edit for you so that you can see one more example with a landscape image. All right, so I've got this image. Let me go to the Develop module, and I'm going to go ahead and bring this image all the way down. Okay, so this is an image that I'd already edited. So I edited it, I made a ton of adjustments. I actually took it into Photoshop and did some cleanup work, but I still feel like the shadows here need to be opened up, and I still want to do some more color tones and brightening in the sky. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is let's start with our sky. So I'm going to select sky here in the new mask tools. We're going to let Lightroom do its magic, and it did a great job. So it's got really just the sky selected. I don't see a lot of runoff. I could also change my overlay maybe to white, just so we can really see where it is, or sometimes even black helps. Might need it to be black. So it looks really good. I feel really good with the overlay. Now what I want to do is I want to intersect it, and I'm going to intersect the mask with a color range. Now you have to take off your overlay when you do that so you can see how to find the color that you want. So I'm going to come in and see if I can find, yeah, that little bit. Now see, this is where sometimes I change the mask color because I can't see what it's selecting. Let's go back to that blue color. All right, so I think it's done a nice job of finding that kind of sunrise, a little bit of that orange color coming in. So I'm now going to refine that because I just want a little bit of it. So that's probably pretty good. I'm going to remove the overlay now. And what I'm going to do is start with saturation because I really want to increase that. There we go. I'm wanting that sunrise to look a little bit brighter than my camera captured it. I also can go and tweak the color. So we don't want it purple or blue or anything crazy. I don't want it green. So I think just, there we go. A little bit more yellow coming down through there. Now I can also add a little clarity while I'm in here to this area. I could also work on the temperature. So that's going to also warm it up. And again, I've got my saturation pretty high. And maybe a little sharpness. I think I'll leave that alone. Okay, so let's check before and after. So it's definitely a little bit brighter and more dramatic. May bring that, dial that saturation back just a little bit. All right, now I also want to impact the luminance in the sky. So I'm going to go back to sky and I'm going to add a second intersect with, And now I'm going to do Luminance Range. So what's fun is we've already got our sky selected. We can continue to refine this mask. So I'm going to go to Luminance, and I'm going to select these brighter areas of the clouds. Now that did too much, so let's come over here and try. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these sliders to impact the luminance. Let's show the overlay, and we can move this gradient to where we're just getting what we want out of the luminance range. There we go. I just want to impact it just a little bit. And that looks good to me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try adding a little bit of whites. So it's just going to brighten. You see if I do a lot, it's really brightening that area. We're just going to do a tiny bit, maybe a little bit of exposure, and reduce the clarity a little. We want to leave that color alone, but just a little bit more brightness. So these are making just micro adjustments to our image. So let's see before and after. So I'm just really playing in these clouds. Now I think I want to add one more, and I think I'm going to try, so to go to Intersect Mask Width, and let's try color range again, and I want to select just this lighter blue. Now I'm going to come down and really refine that. There we go. So it's just that little bit in these clouds. Okay, I'm going to take off the overlay, and I'm just going to pop a little bit of exposure in there, just to bring out that definition in those clouds a little bit more. So again, before, you can see those clouds right here on the right where my mouse is are a little bit crunched up. And now I've just opened them up, given them a little bit more definition. And I could probably even take the whites up just a little bit too. So these are really small adjustments, but they allow you to really customize and personalize your image and make it really stand out. Okay, so I think I'm done with this mask. Now the next thing I wanted to tackle was this mountain area. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new mask, and I'm going to do that linear gradient. And I'm going to come over and select this side of the image. Now that I think about it, I also want to do this side of the image. So I think I'm going to delete that mask, and I'm going to go back and try a different one. So let's delete mask 2, and I'm going to go ahead and create a mask, and I think I'm going to select the subject and see what it does. And it selected almost all the mountains, so that was great. So what I want to do now is click Add, and I'm going to use the brush, and I want to make sure my flow is pretty high and my density. Okay, so I'm going to come in and just continue to make sure that we've got this mountain area all selected. Let's make the mask a little bit, the brush a little bit smaller. Now, if I was doing this to print this image, I would get in and really take my time with the masking, but I'm going to do this a little bit faster for the video. So just coming around. And what's great is because we selected our subject, it's not going to let me, well, I say that, I thought it wasn't going to let me bump into the sky, but we can grab our erase and come down, and I can take that off that edge. There we go. Now what I want to do now is also subtract, and I'm going to use the brush because I do not want it down here. I'm not trying to impact this area of the image. So let me get my brush larger, and I want to just remove that. So you would continue to kind of work with your mask, but my goal is to impact these two mountain areas. So I think I've got the mask pretty well set. I'm going to take, now my option is I can make adjustments to this mask without using the Intersect tool. So I can come in and I can open up the shadows. Here we go. So that's looking better. I'll show you before and after. We can see those areas are opened up. Now what I'd like to do is open up the shadows down in this area a little bit more than the top and maybe add some brightness. So what I'm going to do now, I still have this mask. I have my subject I created. I refined it again. So we're going to go to the very top, and now we're going to do Intersect Mask with, and I think what I'm going to do is a color range, and let's see what it does. Now I could also do a linear, but I've got two sides of the image, so it's going to be hard to do that. So let's try color range. I'm going to come in and try to select just this green color. Now here's a great tip for you. It is showing all of the water, even though we know that we have our subject selected and the water was not in that original image. So it's just, it's almost like a glitch that it's showing us that, but our color range is truly just going to be in these areas that we've, because we're intersecting it. So I'm going to refine, let's show the overlay, and I'm going to refine the color that I selected. Yeah, I just want those those trees selected. So again, let me go back and explain what I was talking about before. So when you are working on this and you select color range, it may show up in other areas of your image, but just know that you'd already selected your subject. And so when you go back to the mask, it will show just that area. It's a little bit of I think a glitch that sometimes the other areas of the image show up that have that color. But because you've got your mask selected, you're going to be okay. I hope that makes sense. So now let's remove our overlay. And what I want to do is just impact the areas that we had selected. I'm going to go ahead and open up the blacks a little. That's too much, just a little bit. Maybe the whites. And maybe some exposure. Just a little bit. And maybe a little clarity, a little dehaze, and maybe some saturation. Yeah, I want to make that green pop just a little bit more. And I'm just trying to look at the mountain range to make sure I haven't done anything funny. I think I'm going to bring back the shadows and just open up the exposure just a little bit to bring out a little bit more detail in those mountain ranges. They're also a little bit blue, so I think I'm going to work on the temperature. Yeah, bring that temperature slider over, which I think is really going to impact that. So let's look at before. You can see how scrunched up and dark, and now we've just opened it up a little bit. Now, if I felt like I needed to add, I could come in and add if I wanted to get closer to the water, so I could make some of those adjustments if I wanted to. All right, so that was doing a little bit more of a complicated mask. Now we could do one more if we wanted. So I'm going to create new mask, and this time I'm going to do a linear gradient, and I'm going to take it, I'm going to flip it around, and let's just do the bottom of the image, really where the water is. I chose a linear because I want it to softly fade into the mountain area. Now what I'm going to do is refine this. I'm going to do intersect with, and I'm going to select luminance. Let's remove our overlay, and I'm going to come in and select kind of this brighter area, and it did a great job. So this is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. When you select this luminance range, it's going to show where the luminance is in your entire image that matches your selection. But don't worry about that. You've already told Lightroom that you have a linear gradient, and that's where we're adding the luminance. So when you go and you click on the word luminance, it's going to show you the mask right here. So it's really tricky. I hope they fix this, but don't. Some people have told me that they've cleared their mask, they've gotten so confused. just know that it's going to show that sometimes. So you can always go back to your steps. Right here's our linear gradient. Right here's our luminance, but if you click on the word luminance, click off the mask a little bit, it'll show the exact area that we're going to work on. Okay, so I'm going to remove the overlay and I'm going to come down now. Now we can refine also our luminance range there. So let me click back on overlay and I'm going to show you how we can make that smaller or we can make it a little bit larger. That looks pretty good. I'm going to take off the overlay and now I want to just brighten that a little bit. So maybe add just a little bit of exposure, a little bit of whites, and a little bit more warmth. There we go. So now let's look at before and just look at that water and after. And I may also reduce the clarity a little bit just to continue to soften it. This was a longer exposure shot. All right, so now I think we've got our shadows are pretty nice on this side of the image. They match the shadows that we see here. We've also got the light has been brightened and we made some tweaks to the sky. So we've done 3 masks and really been able to fine tune those masks using this new Intersect feature. So I hope you have fun trying it. I would start with something simple, and the key, the number one thing to remember is always think about selecting your subject first, and that could be that you select the sky and then you intersect the mask with an additional mask to make a micro adjustment. And that's the way to use the Intersect tool. Thanks, everybody.